All right, let's get right into it. We hear about the global energy transition all the time, right? It's usually talked about like it's this simple, obvious path we have to take. But what if the whole strategy is built on a shaky foundation? Today, we're going to dig into a really provocative argument that questions everything we think we know about our switch to renewable energy.
Wow. I mean, that's a powerful statement. When you hear a critique that strong, you kind of have to stop and ask, okay, who is saying this and what on earth could they mean by that? This isn't some throwaway comment. It's a serious conclusion from a very detailed analysis.
So, the person behind that quote, that's Dr. Lars Schernikau. He's an energy expert and shareholder in a German commodity group, and he laid out this entire argument at a recent conference. What we're going to do in this explainer is break down his thinking piece by piece using the key points he made.
Okay, section 1. Let's get right to the heart of this provocative claim. What is he actually arguing?
Now, this is super important to understand. Dr. Schernikau is not saying renewable energy is bad, period. In fact, he thinks using a solar panel to, say, heat your pool is a fantastic idea. His entire argument is aimed squarely at this idea of a massive, countrywide, grid-scale replacement of fossil fuels with wind and solar. That, he believes, is the real problem.
So, let's get into his reasoning. How does he back this up? Well, it all starts with what he calls the unavoidable physical and technical limits, stuff that he says no amount of wishful thinking can change.
To get his first point, you have to understand this one concept, energy density. It's basically how much energy punch you can pack into a small space. Think about it, a single cup of gasoline has an incredible amount of energy packed inside it. That's high energy density. And here's why that matters so much. Because wind and solar are so spread out, they have low energy density, Schernikau argues you need way more land and a ton more materials just to capture the same amount of energy. In his view, this is the foundational problem that leads to all the other issues, like higher costs and a bigger environmental footprint.
And then there's this, which is a real head-turner, the lifespan of the equipment itself. We're often told that solar panels and wind turbines will last for 25, maybe 35 years, but according to Schernikau's data, for these huge grid-scale projects, the real-world operational life is, well, it's dramatically shorter.
So, why the huge difference? He points to a few things. First, unlike the panel you might put on your roof, the materials for these massive projects are built to be as cheap as possible, not to last forever. Then you've got things like corrosive sea salt just eating away at offshore windmills. And on top of that, the technology gets updated so fast that older equipment is often replaced long before it actually wears out.
Okay, so these physical limits, they lead directly to what he calls the hidden system costs. And this is where the numbers start to get, well, pretty wild.
Let's use his home country of Germany as the prime example. He points out that Germany's natural capacity factor for solar is only about 10%. What does that mean? It means when you average it all out, nighttime, cloudy days, winter, the solar panels are only producing about 10% of what they're theoretically capable of.
So the logic here is pretty simple, but the consequences are huge. If you need power 100% of the time, but your source only works 10% of the time, you have to build 10 times more than you think you need. And that's before you even start thinking about storing the energy for a rainy day.
And of course, you absolutely have to have storage for when it's dark or the wind stops. But here's the catch. According to his numbers, even our best batteries lose about 20% of the energy you put into them. And hydrogen, which is often talked about as the long-term solution, the energy loss there is just staggering, a full 80%.
So, let's put it all together. You've got the massive overbuilding you need because of the low capacity factor. Then you have to overbuild again to make up for all the energy you lose in storage. When you do all that math, Schernikau calculates that a system with just 10 days of hydrogen backup would have to be overbuilt by more than 100 times.
All of these staggering requirements, he argues, don't just exist on paper. They have very real consequences for people and for the planet, which brings us to the human and environmental impact.
Just take a look at this number, 25%. Let that sink in for a second. What could that possibly be?
Well, according to a German government report that Schernikau cites, that's the percentage of households in Germany now considered to be in energy poverty. It means that because of these huge system costs, electricity has become so expensive that a quarter of the population struggles to even afford it.
And the list just keeps going. He cites the International Energy Agency, saying these systems need more raw materials than fossil fuels, they take up massive amounts of land, they're hard to recycle, creating waste, they require a grid that's up to twice as large. And he even argues that all the energy lost contributes directly to warming the biosphere.
Schernikau really sums up the whole economic picture pretty bluntly with this. He argues that with all these immense hidden costs, there's just no way these projects can make money on their own. The only reason they exist, he says, is because of massive government subsidies, which are ultimately paid for by all of us, the taxpayers.
Okay, so that's a pretty heavy critique. If that's the problem, what does he think we should do about it? He doesn't say do nothing. Instead, he lays out a completely different path forward.
His plan really has two parts. First, for the short term, he says we need to get realistic. Global energy demand is going up, not down. So we should invest in making the energy sources we already rely on, like fossil fuels and nuclear, as clean and efficient as possible. At the same time, for the long term, he calls for a massive research and development push to find a truly new energy solution, something that can actually last for 150 years.
And that really leaves us with this final big question. Dr. Schernikau's analysis is a direct challenge to what many of us believe about the future of energy. By laying out these arguments about physical limits, hidden costs, and human impact, he's forcing us to ask a tough question. Is our current path actually sustainable, or is it time to seriously rethink the entire transition?